Welcome to Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam, where we tackle the challenges of raising teenagers without the drama. I'm your host, Dr. Cam. Let's get on with the show. Feeling helpless as your teen battles anxiety, mood swings, and impulsivity? If you're seeking ways to help but unsure where to start, this episode is for you. Today, we're joined by Dianne Kosto, founder of SYMMETRY Neuro-Pathway Training and author of From Trauma to Triumph, One Mom's Mission with Neurofeedback. Dianne will help us unpack how brain-based strategies like neurofeedback can effectively address mental health challenges such as anxiety and impulsivity, which stem from nervous system dysregulation. Welcome to the show, Dianne. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Nice to be
That's
here.
amazing.
Thank you.
I know. I love your background. Like I was saying, it looks so peaceful. So let's start with a quick backstory. What inspired you to pursue neuropathways?
Wow. So it was our personal journey. It was not my expected career path, but my youngest son struggled with impulsivity. I always say impulsivity off the charts, to the point that he got kicked out of every different school or program that I placed him in, starting from when he was about 5 years old. So preschool, then to first grade. I tried homeschool. I tried private schools, homeschool again, ended up sending him to military academy. He was getting bigger and bigger and closer to his teenage years. And the impulsivity could be violent at times. So I was like at the end of my rope, not knowing what to do for him after trying all of these different environments and trying to keep him from becoming one of those quote unquote troubled teens. Have to get sent away to, a program. And that's what I ended up doing. When he got kicked out of the military academy, I didn't know what other options we had. People would just shake their head and say, he's not following the program. You come and get him. So
even the military, that's like
the military
people's last
academy.
Option sometimes, and that was not
believe
helping.
It. I thought it would have been a perfect place for him. And I said, bud, you've got to make this work for you. And if you don't, you're not welcome back home. I had holes in my walls. There was, violence, refusal to do schoolwork. It was just out of control. And I felt like I was obviously failing him, as a parent. So I was looking for other people to help. And so he gets sent to a therapeutic program in the middle of nowhere, Utah. And I get the call from that CEO. Love him. He's a genius, but he's not following the program. What are we going to do? I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Oh my gosh.
You're the expert. You created these programs for these kids. What are we going to do? And whatever you believe in, divine intervention, God, miracles, whatever, somebody introduced me to neurofeedback at that point.
Wow.
I met the founder.
Right when you were at the end of the road.
At the end of the road. He was too dangerous to go to wilderness therapy. He had, got kicked out of so many different environments. We didn't know what to do for him. I could have drugged him, put him on medications, and that we tried that for a little bit, but it was so heartbreaking because he lost his personality and he was just like a zombie. And so I didn't feel like I could do that. I kept trying to find the other thing, the book, the whatever, the process, the program, the anything. But fortunately, I was introduced to the founder of Neurofeedback. And by that point, I was thinking, there's something going on, like neurologically or physically, there's something else. Because he knows what he knows. He's not a terrible, evil kid, right? He just had no pause before reacting. And that doesn't work in our society, right? So
especially when it gets violent, that gets scary.
Yeah, unpredictable. And so I learned a little bit about neurofeedback. And of course, as soon as I heard about it and met this founder of a new neurofeedback company, I was like, this makes sense. We've got to try this, So I went through the training. He loaned me a $22,000 system. And I drove from South Carolina over to nowhere, Utah, and set up in that program. Fortunately, they had an open space and they knew that my son was out of options. So they welcomed me to come and try to help him. And I started running the neurofeedback sessions on him. I shared the information with the parents at parent conference, and they were like, bring it on. We're spending more money than we have. It makes sense. It's non-invasive. Let's try it. So I had this like intensive service happening now with my son and other kids and some of the staff members, running them through sessions throughout the day, every day of the week and a half day on Sunday. And I saw all of them improving in some positive way.
So explain to us, because people are dying now to know what
Yep.
this is. Because I can think of specific people even that I know have kids that they've tried everything and they just don't know what to do. So how does neurofeedback work? What exactly is it?
Mhm. So it starts with an evaluation of some sort with the brainwave activity. So you
Mm-hmm.
measure the communication in the brain. A lot of people have heard about different brain waves, alpha waves for relaxation or delta for sleeping. So we actually measure that in the brain and learn a little bit about how that brain is communicating. And there should be a balance. Depending on what we're doing, there should be certain patterns produced in the brain. And when they're not, and you're out of balance with that communication, that's when symptoms occur, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when the impulsivity kicks in, or depression or anxiety or trouble sleeping or lack of focus. So we measure what's happening. We ask intake questionnaires about what they're experiencing. And then the goal of neurofeedback is to help the brain better regulate. So using that information and technology, we're able to teach the brain to produce healthier patterns through a series of sessions. So when you hear the term neurofeedback, neuro is the measuring part of it. Feedback is they're going to be watching a screen or listening to something. When their brain produces the healthy pattern, it'll play brighter or a little bit louder so they can hear it or see it better. And when their brain is not producing a healthy pattern, it just goes dimmer or quieter. So we're
Hmm.
constantly rewarding the brain so it can see or hear better, and when it produces that healthy pattern. So it's a little bit of operant conditioning and then something else that they don't quite know why, but the brain is able to learn, and
Yeah.
and then it's like learning anything else. You keep repeating it, just like when you learn to ride a bike or write with a pencil. You practice and practice and practice, and pretty soon you're doing it without thinking about it. So that's what happens after a number of neurofeedback sessions. There are actually new pathways in the brain, new synapses. Just it's
Yeah.
neuroplasticity, like when we learn anything else. So
So
that
you're
that does that make
literally
sense?
rewiring the brain. I don't know if that's literal. I think so. Rewiring the brain through these sessions. And why do these sessions work when we can't do it in, quote, real life? What makes
Yeah.
this different?
It's different because you're getting right down to those communication patterns in the brain. The actual physical neurons and synapses in the brain are being um, coached and encouraged to produce healthier patterns, and they're being discouraged to produce the bad ones, right? So
Yeah.
it's a physical aspect of it. Now, and there is a physical change, like I said. Anytime you learn something, we know that, like when you learn to ride a bike and all of that, there it creates physical patterns. But this way, we're really getting in there pretty. We're not doing anything to change those patterns, but we're giving the brain information on what it's doing so that it can change what the communication patterns are.
So how long did your son do this before you started seeing a transformation in his behavior? And
Mhm.
what was that? What did that look
These
like?
are like, oh, it's so interesting. So this was been like maybe 14 years ago. It was gradual. It's not a quick fix or magic
Mm.
pill for a lot of people. But after a couple weeks of running as many sessions as I could during the week, I started to see him, the dark circles under his eyes lightened up a little bit.
Mm.
So I figured he must be resting better, and we never thought that was an issue.
Yeah.
He started to just lighten up a little bit, interact with people a little more. He was refusing less, so he started actually participating in the program,
Yeah.
and then a few more weeks would go by. Pretty soon he's fully engaged and realizing he's got to do what he needs to do if he's ever going to be able to have success and come home again. So it was just little by little over those weeks. And he had about 40 sessions,
Mm.
and that gave him that pause before reacting that he never had since birth.
Yeah.
And that saved his life. He would be
Yeah.
one of those kids that's locked up or not with us, accidentally kill himself kind of kid. And now he's one of the most disciplined people I know.
Wow. That's amazing. And Diane, I really want to point out too that, you're talking about a kid who's been struggling and he probably was seen as the problem kid and just
Yes.
we're trying to do everything we can to get him to behave. And when you get down to it, it wasn't for lack of trying. it was how his brain worked. So
Right.
how do we discern between a kid that is really acting out because they're upset and a kid that's acting out because they can't do it any other way?
Yeah, I think that is such a key question, and that's one of the most important things that I like to convey to parents, because had I known what I know now, if I had a map of his brain when he first started acting out and getting kicked out and we had all of the volatility, if I understood there was a physical reason, I wouldn't have fought him so much, probably, right?
Yeah.
So I kept bucking heads with him. We're both two very stubborn people, right? And I'm a single parent thinking, well, I can't let him just do that, right?
Yeah.
So I was like this and he was like that, and there was this physical component that I wasn't really aware of. I thought it was an attitude too most of the time. Until later on, I started thinking, this is ridiculous. There are so many professionals that are still confused about him. So there's something else going on. But early on, you just think it's their attitude or they're being rebellious or, So I think the key is get that information. We all should have a map of our brains. We should all take a look at what those communication patterns are, because now we can. And it's very simple.
Yeah.
It's
How do you
not
do
out of
that?
our reach.
How do you get a map of your brain?
You find a company like SYMMETRY that can do QEEG brain maps, and you take a look at what's physically happening so that you can understand your family dynamics better.
Wow. And did you look at yours too? What does it look like? What's the difference between a brain that is emotionally dysregulated? Is that what it is? Like, what do you call a brain that's emotionally dysregulated?
There's
Is there a name for that?
dysregulation. Yeah, there are
Okay.
healthy, patterns. I don't like to use the word normal, but
Yeah.
there's zones, and the brain should be able to shift back and forth easily. When a brain kind of gets stuck and it's producing too much of something at the wrong time, that's when you have issues. And that could be too much fast wave activity, it could be too much slow wave activity, it could just be too much on one side or the other. So we kind of know from studies of the brain now what healthy brains should be producing. So you take a
Yeah.
look at that brain map, and it's not really meant to be diagnostic, the ones that we use. We're not going to put a label on anyone, but we can identify those areas that are
Mhm.
producing incorrect patterns and start to help the brain learn to change that. And so, yes, I have looked at my brain. I didn't have, actually, when I first started with my son, we didn't even have the full 19 site brain
Mm.
maps. I did a single channel evaluation in the top middle of his head, and we still could tell enough information to help his brain better regulate. And then years later, we got the actual full brain maps. And of course, there are patterns from your parents
Mhm.
that get passed into the kid's brain. So I
Yeah.
could see mine and I see my one son, just like personalities, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, now I see they could have gotten that from me, and then I see my other son, yeah, he might have gotten some of that from me too. So,
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think it's really interesting. We're talking about the neural pathways and creating those and changing those patterns. But a lot of, like you were saying, a lot of those patterns get formed. They're not born with it. They get created while we're growing up, and during the teen years is when they really do, because our brain is growing really fast and building a lot of those connections. What are things or patterns that we need to look at from our perspective and how we're interacting with our kids that might be impacting those negative patterns or helping build those negative patterns in our kids?
mhm. That's a really interesting and good question. And you're right, there are a lot of factors involved. Nobody has a perfect brain. So there could be genetic factors as to why there's dysregulation, or it could be developmental. It can be stress related. It could
Mm-hmm.
be a diet or toxins that someone's exposed to, and it can be behavioral, and I do believe that we have such high levels of stress in our society right now
Yeah.
that I feel like if we paid attention to that and looked, even before COVID, I was seeing more and more patterns of anxiety in the brains
Mm-hmm.
across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Then we added the whole pandemic and everything else. So I feel like if we had an understanding of what's happening in each other's brains, and we respected that fact that some of the bad behaviors and anger and impulsivity or lack of focus is related to those anxiety patterns, and that hypervigilance that we're kind of producing, then we can maybe relate to people differently. If I looked at my son and I understood he was scared or anxious, I wouldn't have treated him like I did.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole different thought process when you realize that. And that's why people act out. They're trying to protect themselves in the way that they know how to.
100%. I love that. And, you found this reason, but I think what's really important to take away from that is rather than making an assumption, which we usually go down a negative path, they're trying to be difficult, and then we try to shut them down, think there's something I'm missing.
Right.
There's something, whether it's needing, emotional dysregulation, whether it's they're upset about something, whether they're scared, there's a reason underlying their behavior. And that's what we've got to get to. And if we don't, and we keep pushing and just trying to stop it, we're feeding into that negative pattern, and we're just making that negative pattern stronger.
Exactly.
So
You
we
nailed it.
need to change how we approach it. And I think that's such a key piece of this that I think we often miss.
Right.
It's our approach that can change it. What I really want to understand too, when our brains are, I want to go back to the anxiety. Actually, this is where I was thinking of. So I have kind of the theory that you were talking about too, where the world today is really fast paced, really very stimulating. Do you think that there is a factor in that our brains are still built the same way they were built ages ago, and teens are still going through the same developmental phase, but the external input is so much greater that our brains can't handle it as well?
Yeah, I don't know about the evolutionary aspect, how confident I feel in that, and how much we should have evolved by now. But I do believe that our society and our electronics and our lifestyle has to be training our brains to be more hypervigilant.
Yeah.
It just makes sense because we're constantly stimulating our brains. And I believe that's why I'm seeing more and more patterns of hypervigilance and anxiety in the brain. So I think that's a factor. I think probably our diet and nutrition is a factor as well, because we're missing a lot of nutrients that we didn't used to have, and we don't even know until something very negative happens physically later on, decades later. So even our kids that you think are just young and healthy and full of growth hormone and it's good, they can have deficiencies, and that affects your brain and your whole body and your nervous system. And again, your body, when you're under stress or anxiety or something's wrong, all it's doing is trying to protect itself. And whatever that behavior is, it's really a protective mode. It could be shutting down and going into depression, or it could be acting out like a wild man, right?
Right, exactly. He was in chronic stress mode all the time, probably. And I see this with a lot of, adults too, but a lot of kids who there's certain places, whether it's school or home, that the second they walk in the door, they go into defense mode. Immediately. And so any sort of interaction with them, they're already about to explode. And so the smallest little thing just sends them over because they're already there. I want to ask you, you brought up the phone. And I know there's so much controversy over the impact the phone has on brain development. I don't know if you've looked at any of this, but do you think in terms of the patterns we create and these negative patterns, do you think the phone impacts those patterns, and how?
I personally believe it does. And again, I'm not the total expert in that area. I'm, really have focused in on neurofeedback. But to me, it is a form of neurofeedback.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's a training. It is a constantly giving us feedback on what we're doing. Now, we're not measuring anything in the body, but we're constantly stimulating the body in one way or another. Is it a positive like? Is it a negative like? Which chemical is going to be released? That has to do something. That's how learning takes place, right? That's how our responses happen when we get exposed to anything. So I don't understand. I can't comprehend that it would not be having an effect. Yeah. But that's my personal opinion. So
I mean, there's so much controversy around all of it, right? And what to do about it. So let me ask you this. If someone's suspecting we've tried a lot. We're trying to stay calm. We don't know what to do. And our child just nothing seems to stop this explosive behavior. And is it mostly explosive behavior you see, or how else is it expressed?
It's a lot of different behaviors.
Okay.
Like I mentioned earlier, it could be sleep issues. And a lot of times we don't even realize how poor our sleep is and how much that affects us in our daily life. So, sleep issues, cognitive challenges,
Hmm.
anger, anxiety. It's really think about all of the different symptoms that can't really be cured or that are
Yeah.
trying to be managed by medications. It comes down to underlying miscommunications in the brain most of the time. All of those things that I just mentioned that we're
Yeah.
trying to find a way to deal with. If you can regulate the brain, a lot of times they fall into place.
So if you're suspecting this, what is the first step parents can take to take action?
hmm I think the first step is what you said, is realizing, hey, there
Mm,
might be something more to this. Yeah, they've had a couple episodes and they might be in a bad mood or whatever. But if you're seeing repetitive patterns and you're not able to help them get out of that pattern, there's probably a physical reason in their brain. So
yeah.
find someone, do your research, talk to someone that's doing QEG maps that you'll be able to understand. And I pride Symmetry in the fact that we have user-friendly ones that you will understand when we go over them with you. It's not super neuro guru science that's going to go over your head and you won't understand it. We
Right.
want you to understand the data that we have. So, find someone like that and get that data, get that information so that you know how to handle the other family member or they know how to handle you, right?
Yeah.
But the awareness is first. Yeah.
The awareness is key. And one of the things I learned from hearing your story too is you don't give up on them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many times in this story you just shared that I feel people would have been so frustrated. It would have just been like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so not giving up on your kid because you're, it wasn't your kid.
It wasn't. And when I think about all of the people that are locked up in jail or that we have lost
Oh,
because we didn't have the information that I was
yeah.
missing, for all of those years. And yeah, we went through trauma, but there's a lot of other families out there too, even worse off than we were, and it's a simple thing. We have access to it now. The technology isn't as scary and cumbersome as it used to be. We have the ability to send a remote system and map someone across the country and zoom in and help them do it. So
Yeah.
it's much more accessible than it had been. So a note on that is I like technology too. I don't want to be the bad person, but
Right?
I like working on my phone and there's
Hmm.
really great aspects of it. And that's what this is. This is using technology to help the brain learn healthier patterns to counteract the negative ones we're creating, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the technology is really awesome, and it's shrinking and becoming much more available too, which is
That,
awesome.
and I was wondering too, because, it's something that some people have access to, some people don't. Is it something that insurance will pay for at this point, or is it still too new that insurance is like,
Mhm.
no?
Yeah, so there's much more coverage than there used to be 14 years
Mm,
ago when I first got into the field, and there's definitely a big push for it because why not? But
yeah.
big pharma does not support neurofeedback.
Yeah. No, right? We want to drug you. Yeah, that makes
Right.
sense.
So it is still hit and miss in different states and depending on the provider. I don't think
Mm,
that any remote neurofeedback is covered yet, but certainly there are some states like Medicaid and stuff that are covering it. When that happens, then some of the private pay can cover it. So
can do.
you really just have to investigate if you're dependent on insurance. But the fact is that the price point is coming down. I mean, we're able to roll out some different devices for under $500 a month now, and before
Yeah.
it was 5,000 at least for
Wow.
a plan. So we really are making strides in that area too to make it more accessible.
So when you're saying the equipment, is this something people do in their own home, or is this something they find someone that does it?
Either or. There
Oh,
are
really?
offices. I used to have a bunch of offices over here, but we gradually closed them down because we can do remote very successfully. I've got a great team of coaches that we send the equipment, we zoom in and help them, make sure they know where to put the sensor. Um, and we really support them. We're always checking in a couple times a week and we're looking at the sessions that they do. from our end of it, we're able to see that remotely. So it worked for so many people that it wasn't really worth it for me to have an office anymore. But I also am focusing on helping providers provide this. So I want more schools to have this in the school. I want more therapists to have access to be able to provide it for their clients. We just need to have many more providers than us. So
what does the training look like for that? Can anybody do it? Can a parent go, okay, I want this for my child, and like you, I'm going to go learn how to do it? Can they do that?
They can. And most companies have their own training and certification. There's no licensing for neurofeedback because it's technology driven learning. It's non-medical. Let me say this though, there are other styles of neurofeedback that are out there that are would be considered medical because they put a low level current or magnetic stim around the brain. That is different. So that has to be more supervised, and there may be a level of licensing required if you're going to get into that style of neurofeedback. I've had so much success with what we're doing that I had no need to venture into that. And I don't have that kind of licensing anyways. I don't want to.
Right. Well, I just think that's so amazing. If you've got a child that you think, and you have the opportunity, of course, and the support to do it, but we need more people, how cool would it be to you learn, you help your child, and then there's other kids out there that could use it too. And we just that's amazing. Are there any negative, what do we need to be concerned about when it comes to neurofeedback?
I'll go back and talk a minute about the training because I didn't really answer your question. There's no licensing on it. Our company, we start you out with an online course, and then we spend a day and a half with you, and you can be out of the gates and running because we're going to continue to support you all along the way. So we have the hardware, the software, the training, and the support because I want it to be easy for coaches and parents and therapists and schools to provide it. So every company has their own things. We stair step you up along the way and make it really easy to get started. As far as negative side effects, so the one thing they say about neurofeedback is it's like relaxing the nervous system. So the side effects can be similar to when you get a massage or something that you're deeply relaxing. If you're not used to relaxing, that can feel a little bit emotional sometimes. It can make you a little bit uncomfortable sometimes if you're not used to relaxing. There are some protocols that might be a little more stimulating for an hour or two after you do it. But usually that just subsides. And we like to really start very gradually so that people don't have big swings of responses. That generally that's it. It's just like learning anything else. You just want to be careful, make sure you're well hydrated and you have some type of fuel for your brain to do its work, and it's got the glucose that it needs to do its thinking and training. So
that's amazing. So Dianne, what is one thing you want parents to walk away with from this episode?
It's that awareness part of it. Change your perspective when you're having negative relationships with people and consider the fact that there's a physical reason. I think that can change our society if people understand that.
Really? It really can. I love that. How do people find you if they want to work with you?
They can look up our website, SYMMETRYNeuroPT.com. Just give us a call. We can have a conversation whether you want to be a provider, or we will still directly provide services for any family that's in need right now until we have so many providers that we have to send the people to those providers.
Right.
Just find us on the website. You can schedule an appointment there or call.
That is wonderful. Dianne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Do it again.
I learned a lot.
Awesome.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam. Don't forget to hit follow so you don't miss a single episode, and share the love by passing this on to a friend. Until next time, keep making a positive impact in your teen's life.